another episode of Spicy Brain Podcast. Today I'm joined by James Hunt. He is the author of Love Needs No Words, and he's also the person behind the incredible account of Stories About Autism. James shares his experience of what it's like to parent two non-speaking autistic boys, and he also goes into what communication, joy, and love looks like beyond words. Today, we will dig deep into what different experiences look like on the autistic spectrum, as well as the realities that many families face on a daily basis. James, welcome to the Spicy Brain Podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Very happy to have you here. So you are the father of two incredible non-speaking autistic boys, Tommy and Jude, who actually inspired your most recent book, which is Love Needs No Words, which I've been reading, and I've also been seeing the reviews you have online, and they've been just fantastic. I'm sure you're proud. You've been on the press tour, and I've seen them pouring in. So we're going to be talking about that today. But they are also the inspiration behind all the community work you do through Stories About Autism. So tell us a little bit about Tommy and Jude. Talk to us about them.
Where to start talking about Tommy and Jude? So, for some context, Jude is 17, Tommy is 14. They're both autistic and non-speaking. They also have ADHD diagnoses. Tommy has some tics and sensory issue challenges as well. And yeah, they are two incredible boys who I'm blessed to be their dad. It's been a roller coaster of a journey for the last 17 years. I've learnt so much. They've taught me so much. And yeah, I'd say we're in a really good place at the moment with their, doing things that a long time ago I couldn't imagine they'd be doing. And yeah, they're both really happy. So yeah, we're in a good place.
Amazing. Good. So Jude being the eldest, I can imagine he got his diagnosis before Tommy. Yeah. Did he have his diagnosis before Tommy was born?
He did, yes.
Okay.
So it's quite unheard of these days, but Jude and Tommy were both diagnosed before they were 2. So very early. When I tell parents this now, they're in shock because there is incredibly long waiting lists and it just doesn't happen. So for Jude, we waited, I think, about 6 months, which at the time felt like forever. I appreciate nowadays you wait a lot longer. So going back to that time, I knew next to nothing about autism. I had very little, Jude was our first child. I had very little experience of other babies, shall we say, and how they should develop and typical timelines, other than what we learn through books and films and TV, and you just have all these expectations of what will happen. And his mum, Charlotte, was, I'd say, about 9 months, sort of showing concerns from, she'd been to baby groups and seeing Jude not quite being on the same level as the other kids where it comes to progression. And I guess not that I didn't want to believe it because I didn't know that, what it would lead to, but I just thought that, he's my boy, he's going to be fine. Yeah. He was born 6-7 weeks prematurely and he'll catch up. And the doctors seem to say the same. Yeah. Every time she went to the doctors, they quickly pushed her away and sent her home. And I was glad because I thought, that's it. He's going to be fine. And then we went on holiday when Jude was about 14 months, something like that. And we had a German family staying next door to us, and they had a little girl who was younger than Jude and was so far advanced of him, and it just blew my mind. I was like, okay, now I see it. I see this is where, he's not hitting those milestones, he's not progressing. So when we got home, I, supported her, and we went through that again with the doctors, and yeah, just before he was 2, we came out that room with an autism diagnosis.
And was it difficult to kind of come to terms with that, or how did that feel as parents to navigate it? Because I do know, of course, a mother's intuition, there's nothing stronger on many occasions, but I have heard many times that it's the parents that need to push and advocating and keep pursuing because they do see that slight difference potentially in the kids. So how did it feel when you guys got that, yes, he's autistic?
I think back then, like I said, we knew very little about autism other than what we'd managed to Google and find out. And back then, especially, the information that was there wasn't like it is now. It was all quite medical. It was all quite professional. A lot of things that I just couldn't quite wrap my head around of, talking about the distant future, and I've got this tiny little boy, and it just didn't match up. And then when we had the diagnosis, and they were sort of showing on a chart where Jude was developmentally, showing that there was a chance he may never speak, that he left with a diagnosis of severe autism, which was used back then. And yeah, it was heartbreaking. It was scary. Suddenly everything you imagine as a parent is thrown into doubt.
Yeah.
Whether he'll speak, whether he'll make a friend, whether he'll ever be independent, have a job, all those things that you just think, oh, well, this will happen, and that will happen, and that will happen. And yeah, it was a real, I guess, sad time, looking back, because we were so worried about his future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess then that throws you into, this is our new reality. How do we move forward? Like, how do we, first of all, expedite that learning of what autism is? But then how do we accommodate and have those adjustments for him? How did that journey go? Did you feel forced into it, or did you get that kind of second wind of courage as to, this is really sad, this is our new reality, but we need to improve his reality?
I think I had that feeling, and I really wanted to throw myself into it, but I also felt like I'm a researcher. I will spend hours Googling, reading, taking in all the information, and that's how I'd always been. And for some reason, it just wouldn't stick. I couldn't, no matter, I'd like read it again the next day, and it was like it was just falling out of my head.
Yeah.
And I think it was the stress and the overwhelm and the worry. And for me, I was like, right, let's do a course, let's do this, let's do that. And we did all those things, but it took a long time to really sink in, I think.
Yeah.
And part of that was, I think, realizing that we had to learn from Jude, that autism is very different for everybody. And we develop and learn in time, like what actually works for Jude, what does he enjoy, what does he like, what doesn't he like. And then it was also starting to meet other people who we felt very lonely and isolated in the beginning. And we met a family who were a couple of years ahead of us. Their son was 4, and he'd just started to speak. He, received a diagnosis around 2 or 3, and they became, I think, our first step sort of into the community and talking to people who were going through a similar experience, who had searched for support, were starting to go through the school process, and just give us little tips and guide us that maybe other families we knew couldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was something we were speaking about before coming in here, that you, of course, have, physical disabilities which make that connection easier with other people. But getting an autistic diagnosis is very lonely, not only for the child, of course, but, Jude in that time was quite young, but for the parents necessarily, because you want to support them, you want to be there for them. But where do you start? How do you associate? How do you connect with other people that are going through that? So I think more than ever for neurodivergent people, it's like community is really powerful, to feel that belonging and to get that support as to where do I go next. Because the issue is you get the diagnosis, but no one tells you what to do next. And I think that's a very challenging stage. So, okay, so he was 2 when he got the diagnosis, and then later on Tommy came along. How was that?
Yeah, so Tommy is near enough 3 years exactly younger than Jude. And I guess, so when Tommy was born, Jude had been diagnosed for about a year. So we had some sort of base level understanding of autism and how, what life was looking like for Jude. And I guess during the pregnancy and maybe that first year as well, we felt quite anxious and worried
I can imagine
that Tommy was going to be autistic too, or that he was going to have these struggles. And I feel like we probably didn't enjoy that first year as much as we should have, because we're constantly assessing and thinking, he's doing something that's great, like he's progressing, he's looked at me, he's tried to communicate, that's different to what Jude was doing at that age. Or he seems quite distant today, he's not interested, like maybe we do need to speak to a doctor. All those things came up again. And by the time Tommy was 2, we was back in that same room with the same team of people and going through his diagnosis. And I think it happened a bit quicker with Tommy, I think because we'd been through it once and knew what to say and what to ask, and maybe they thought, well, they have an autistic child already, like they kind of know what they're talking about. And I think when we came out of there, it probably hit me harder than it did Jude.
Yeah.
Partly because by then Jude was 5 and I'd seen a lot of the struggles he'd had. He still wasn't talking. He still needed a lot of support on a daily basis. We were looking at a special needs school for him. And having had that experience in reality, suddenly I'm really worried that that's what Tommy's is going to be like. And he's going to struggle. He's not going to be able to talk. He's going to struggle to make friends. So yeah, I think that the second time around, it definitely hit me a lot harder, even though I probably knew a lot more about autism as well, which was a positive because I knew how to help Tommy and how to best be around him.
Do you feel like maybe your awareness and your knowledge of the autistic spectrum is what kind of made you get that double whammy of like, it's a second time around, this is going to be challenging?
Yeah, because I think at the time it was still very much about what Jude can't do. And that was very much the mindset of all the things he's falling behind on and all the things he's unable to do, rather than being able to focus on how happy he is at times and some of the more beautiful things that he does, which I feel like now, after being on this journey and after, going through so much, that is what we focus on. And that is, yes, there's things we still want to work on and make progress with, but the majority of the time I'm able to focus on the positives and the good things about Jude. And going back to then, it was very much like I still couldn't imagine how Jude's going to have this full life and be non-speaking. I still couldn't understand, how that could work. How can anyone, what's he going to be like when he's 18 if he still can't speak? And suddenly those fears were there for Tommy too.
Yeah, and I think that's reassuring for families out there like yourself, that period is so daunting and so scary because you can't see the future ahead of you. But I think that what you're showing is really a full circle as to like, now they're progressing. It doesn't mean they have less challenges. It's just you've learned how to adapt and help them and make sure that they're fulfilled in a daily life. So I think that's incredibly encouraging for other families. And I think something we were speaking about as well is like, you become a parent and you embark in this exciting journey as a couple, as to, welcoming a little bundle into the world, and it's your first and it's so daunting, but then you get this diagnosis and you spoke about expectations of parenthood and the milestones that they need to hit. How did you manage those emotions? Did you have expectations as a parent, or did it feel like you were grieving that expectation you had?
Yeah, I had those, especially being a dad of 2 boys. I thought it was going to be very much like my life as a kid. I thought, hopefully they're going to love sport and we're going to go and play football and we're going to play tennis and cricket and golf and all the different things. And that that's what our weekends will be. We'll go on holidays, we'll go to museums and cinema and the beach and, do all the things you just expect, that suddenly were very difficult for them. And just going out and about in the community was hard, and they would get overwhelmed. Like, I remember the first few times trying to take Jude to birthday parties where you think these are the highlight of a kid's day and of their week. Like, they can't wait to go to this birthday party. And he hated them. He would be screaming and crying, and I'd have to take him out and, walk him in a buggy to try and calm him down. And I just couldn't understand, he's supposed to enjoy this. He's supposed to like this. And it took a long time to process that and adapt to that. And you mentioned a grieving process. And I feel sometimes people are quite scared of that word, as if it should only be applied to death. Yeah. And if you use that word, people say, well, he's alive, you shouldn't be grieving. And it's not that I'm grieving Jude or Tommy as such. It's grieving a life that we expected. And
Absolutely.
you can grieve a relationship breakdown. You can grieve losing your dream job. You can, like, there's so many things that can apply to. It doesn't have to be death. And yeah, the fact that Jude and Tommy have very limited communication, the fact that they can have these huge meltdowns at times, or that the simplest of things can seem really difficult for them, I think it's okay to grieve that.
Yeah.
It's okay to wish that life was easier for them, and in turn for us as parents, that, you know, the happier and more fulfilled they are and more able to do things. And the same of my life. I'm able to, we don't get to go on foreign holidays. I always imagined that would be, I loved traveling. I loved it. I used to go away a lot as a kid, and I imagined that would be part of my life going forward.
Yeah.
So it's okay to be sad about that, that you're not going to be able to do that, or that we're never going to go to an Arsenal game. Like, that's okay to be sad about. I'm okay with it now. There was times when they were younger where it did really affect me.
Of course. Yeah.
But we adapt, and that's one thing I always say to parents who are sort of very early on, is that time changes, like changes us and changes them and changes everything.
Yeah. And I think as well, of course, non-speaking autistic kids are the priority in their well-being, and making sure that everything is good for them. But it's not spoken about enough about parents and caregivers as to the process that you go through, and giving kind of your life away to make sure that they're okay. So I think that message is also important for people who are going through it, because, as we said, it is lonely and it is difficult, and you want to do right by them, but then you're sacrificing kind of in some occasions, your ideas and dreams of what life could be. You did mention you met that family who had a son that was 2 years ahead, and they were like a good guiding light as to the journey ahead. How did you find in those birthday parties that you mentioned other parents of neurotypical kids? Did you feel well received? Did you feel that maybe they were misunderstanding Jude, or how was that reception of Jude's diagnosis?
Looking back, I don't know if it's paranoia almost of what people may actually think, or whether maybe they did think negatively, and I've kind of blocked it out now. But I definitely remember a few occasions where, obviously you go to birthday parties and kids cry. That happens. But generally they calm down and they see the cake and sweets and the entertainers, and they go off happy again. But for Jude, that wasn't happening. I remember being in a side room in this party, and just continually crying and screaming, and and people would say that, oh, he'll be all right in a minute. And obviously with the best intentions, hopefully he will be. But then you realise, like, 5 minutes later, when he's still screaming and crying, and you do feel the people looking at you like, what's going on? Why is that kid still upset? Like, and you start to think that people are judging him and judging you as a parent, and I'd choose to leave. I'd choose like, okay, let's get out of there, and we'll see. Maybe if he calms down, we'll come back, and maybe it will work, or we'll just leave. And that applies to lots of public places. That can be the park, that can be the supermarket. And quite often for families like ours, we start to feel our world shrinks, and that there's not many safe spaces we can go to, or it may even be family members' houses that you go to that aren't quite understanding, or just kind of think that your child should behave differently, and if you just do this, then he will, or if you just do that. And for us, we were, generally quite lucky with that. We had, very supportive family, but it was just became too apparent that even that was too overwhelming. So our world did shrink at times, and we did become quite isolated, and you choose then to protect your kids in the sense of,
absolutely,
do we go out because we should go out? Like, should we go to families' houses? Should we go to the park? Or do we stay at home because that's safe, and I'd rather do that than have a huge meltdown? And it's trying to get that balance right at times. But yeah, there can be a lot of judgment. I think definitely more so for mums than for dads. Like, I've been I think I have been quite fortunate in that maybe people think it and don't say it when it's me, but maybe with definitely Jude and Tommy's mum or other mums, they might get the rude comment or the tuts and those things more often. But yeah, it's tough. It's
no,
tough.
I can imagine. And that's something you do speak a lot about within the book. At what stage did you feel in that journey that it was, let's say, your canon event to share your story online and start stories about autism that then has led you to write the book? What was that moment that you said, I need to share this?
I think, like all good ideas, it happened in the pub, which...
Well, I must tell you, my parents met at the pub. They're Irish Spanish, so I can't complain about that comment. That's a fact. Good things happen in the pub. I wouldn't be here.
Exactly. So going back, I've been sharing stories online for nearly 11 years now, and 11 years ago, I couldn't say the word autism without tears in my eyes. I couldn't. We were in a place where it was very difficult and very hard each day for Jude and Tommy, and in turn for us as parents. And we weren't going to spend time with friends and family. I felt that my friends and family weren't getting to know Jude and Tommy, and that really upset me. Not through their fault, but through us just not being able to go to places and do the social occasions. And then when I'd see them, they'd ask how the boys, and I'd say, yeah, they're fine, thanks, and sort of skirt over everything, because how do you try and explain in 2 minutes what you've been through for the last 6 months?
How deep do you go with it, you know?
So I was in the pub, and my friend, I think we'd had a couple of drinks, and my friends actually started asking some questions, and for some reason I answered them a bit more honestly. And I felt that I turned around and realised that everyone was listening and that they wanted to know more. And maybe one or two of them admitted they sometimes didn't know what to ask or what to say. So we, especially as men, like just skated around it and didn't really go too deep and moved on. So I thought, okay, I came away from there thinking, did I say all the things I wanted to say? Did I do Jude and Tommy justice? So I thought, well, what if I write it down? What if I just give a little update? Social media was still quite new then. We were just really doing like little glimpses into our lives, as well as now we share a lot more. And I thought, let's do a post and friends and family can read it in their own time. And then maybe next time we meet up, we can have a bit more of a conversation. And I did that a couple of times and helped them understand a lot more. It helped improve our conversations. And then suddenly someone would share it and a friend of a friend would comment, and then a friend of a friend of a friend would comment or like, and they might send me a message and say like, oh, my son's autistic and I feel that way too. And it just snowballed into, there was never a plan of, oh, let's, turn this into a big social media page and write a book and anything like that. It was just for years a way of sharing little insights into our life and thinking, well, this way friends and family are getting to know Jude and Tommy, but also the wider world are getting to know Jude and Tommy as well. And once I realised that so many people were interested and that they could relate to our family because they were living similar lives, it just inspired me to do more and more.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned there is so important as to how that started at the pub of like someone had the courage to ask. And I think with the growth in conversations about neurodivergence and autism in particular, it's like people don't know fundamentally. And when people don't know, they're afraid to ask, to say the wrong thing. And that's okay. But I think by you starting to share those snippets, that gave them permission to then read it in their own time, try to process it a bit, and then know what to ask the next time. And that, as you said, creates a snowball of people feeling more uncomfortable in their lack of knowledge, which is totally acceptable as long as they have that courage to keep asking and keep learning and hold space for those experiences. So I think that's special. And I think your page and the book and everything is testament as to like how far that's reached and how many families you've helped feel seen and also how well you're representing Tommy and Jude, because I know that I can speak for myself, and half of the internet, we're obsessed with them and we love following their story and their quirks and the challenges that they face on a daily basis. And I think you've truly humanized them in that regard, and I think it's beautiful what you've done. I do think something that is misunderstood from non-speaking autistic kids and people is that they have an inability to communicate. And I think that's what the book's all about, right? Like, love needs no words. So with that said, what does the day-to-day look like for you guys, and how do you communicate with them?
Yeah, I think the phrase love needs no words comes from really realizing that there's so many different ways to communicate. And I heard it many years ago when Jude and Tommy were young. I can't remember exactly where the first time was I saw it, and I talk about it in the book, and it's a way most people have found our story online is a moment that I had with my dad and Jude, where Jude is in a paddling pool and my dad it's cold because it's England. It's
Shocker.
The water's cold. It's warm enough to have a paddling pool out, and my dad is bringing back buckets of warm water and filling up the paddling pool. And Jude was about 7 or 8, I think. And this was back in a time where we didn't record everything. I'm amazed that I managed to capture this moment on video. But Jude spontaneously sort of stood up, pulled my dad down towards him and gave him a kiss on the cheek because he'd filled the pool with warm water. And that was a real moment for me of like realizing that Jude can't say thank you. Jude can't say that he's happy or that he loves you, but he's just shown it there in this spontaneous moment of, it wasn't like he did this every day. He never, showed these outbursts of emotion like that. And it just really made me see that connection. And I share that video once a year for years, and every time it goes viral and millions of views, and it really seems to resonate with people. And that was that sort of first moment for me of realizing that there's so many different ways to communicate that my boys do on a daily basis that often we don't pay attention to as much. We as people, we rely on words, spoken words. We rely on, if we say, oh, why are you not talking to me? Well, I am. I just haven't said, there's so many parts in our day where we just focus on spoken language. And Jude and Tommy and many others like them communicate so much through so many different ways. You asked on a day-to-day basis, like, how do they communicate? So Jude is still very much, he will lead you. He will take you by the hand and thrust you towards what it is that he wants. He communicates so much with his eyes.
Yeah.
With his eyes, I can tell whether he's happy, he's sad, he's hungry, he's excited, he's anxious. And Jude has this way of, if you spend any time with Jude and he gives you a smile, you're gone. Like he will do anything for him for the rest of his days. And he just captivates people. And I think it's probably held back his communication in a way because he's able to make people do things for him. And
it's efficient.
Just, yeah,
he's an efficient person.
Jude is very efficient. He's able to get you to do things, and he communicates in the most minimal of ways. But it works. It works for him. You use a lot of intuition, a lot of getting to know him, and you just, he goes with it. He's very, if I offer him choices of things, he's very happy to, just choose one and go with it. Whereas Tommy, on the other hand, has probably a lot more outward communication. He has some spoken words, like he can say da. He just can't connect the second syllable of a word.
Gotcha.
So he'll say like the first, if do you want a ball, Tom? But he can't connect the next part. And he uses an AAC app, which is on his iPad and is a way of communicating. So an AAC app will have pictures or symbols connected with words, and he can press them and it will construct a sentence. He uses it mainly to ask for food. So
I love that for him.
It'll be
again, efficient.
very efficient. It will be, Dad, I would like white cake. I'm like, okay. And
never a veg.
Never a veg. We've not got to that stage. But he can use it to tell me where he wants to go, to lots, you can use it in all, you can have full conversations on it, but we've not quite progressed to that stage with him. And he's much more independent, but also the app has enabled him to really explode the growth in his understanding of language. He plays around with it and presses words and listens to them, and he's been using it for about 6-7 years now, and his understanding of language is like, he understands everything I say to him, and it can be frustrating at times for him because he can't necessarily express himself back enough but he understands everything I say to him. We use thumbs up, thumbs down for yes and no. He'll nod, shake his head. 6 months ago now, he started to text me, which 7 months ago I never would have thought was possible. It wouldn't have crossed my mind that this was a stage we would reach. And it's shown such a deeper side to him. He communicates so much more fully through text. We've only ever been able to talk about the here and now with Tommy, or give him a schedule of what's about to happen. Whereas with text, he will tell me about his day. He will tell me about what happened today, yesterday. We will talk about what's going to happen tomorrow. He will tell me how he's feeling. Whilst I was on the book tour last week, I had to change his schedule, and he is always with me on a Friday evening. So it was a big deal, me being away, and we had to do a lot of work around it. And on Thursday night, when he was reminded that I wasn't going to be there the next day and he was going to stay with his mum's, at his mum's house, he was quite frustrated about it and wasn't happy. And then when we text that evening, he spent a couple of minutes. I was waiting for the next message to come through, and he loves communicating in GIFs. So I got a GIF of an angry Mickey Mouse stomping his foot. And I was like, okay, this is a new one. I was like, are you okay, Tom? And he typed back, angry. And I was like, why, what's wrong? And he went, okay, night, Dad. I was like, I've just been like this. He's cut me off.
Yeah,
he's
ghosting me.
He's an angry teenager. He's like, which was, obviously was sad in that moment, but also so happy because we've never had that before. Like, I've never been able to express that before. And so get long story short, there's so many different ways he communicates, but just without spoken words.
I have to confess, since following you, when you started posting those WhatsApp conversations, I am just obsessed. I love it every time you post them. I scrolled to the last slide. I'm so bought into the conversation. And I think it's because it unlocks a whole different type of communication for autistic people, in which he finds a safe space to communicate without the pressure of having to, on the spot, to have to communicate. And I deeply relate to that, because whilst of course in a different set of challenges, I detest a phone call. I will not pick up the phone unless it's my family, and yes, I do it daily, but it's a 30-second and I'm off the phone. However, I'm a texter. I will text for hours on end and have full-blown conversations on text. And what I find fascinating is the opposite of what you've experienced. So my dad would be a typical dad texter, thumbs up. You share a life update, he's like, thumbs up. And he, since my diagnosis, would have never texted and has now found that kind of effort into try to have more conversations on text. And when Tommy shared that he was angry because, that sense of change, I was actually so proud of him, and I've never met him, because I know how difficult it is for autistic people to share our emotions and to put them into words or text or whatever that might be. And for him to do that, yes, I can appreciate that for you it was a difficult moment, but that is leaps of what you would expect him to do and sharing those emotions. So I genuinely absolutely love them, because you can see its progress, and it's I can imagine for you it's a different type of bonding that you've had before.
It's become like genuinely can't wait for every text conversation. It's become part of his routine now. Every night before he goes to bed at his mum's, he will text me, and I can't wait to see, okay, what is it going to be about tonight? What is the what shall I ask him? What shall I try and see what's gone on? And I think the beautiful thing that comes back to sharing these moments online and why they're so impactful is I've had so many people, like you said, you're invested in these conversations, and they go, there's lots of response every time I share them. But so many people have messaged me saying either it gives me so much hope that my 7-year-old will one day, that we might be able to do this, that we might be able to find a different way to communicate than speech. I've had families who have started trying texting and had never thought to try it before, and are having progress and having conversations, and they're like, we just hadn't thought that we might be able to do this. And even to what you said, it just shows that technology can unlock something, and it's just more comfortable for some people. I don't really love phone. I don't think many people like phone calls anymore. We are becoming texters, and there's so many different ways we can communicate. And I know people who are autistic who are very verbal, have complete spoken language, but in harder moments have shut down, or
I'm that type.
They will resort, and they've said, I'm now thinking about, well, actually I can text someone. Like I know families who've told me they're like mum and daughter will sit next to each other and they won't speak, but they'll text each other because in that moment their daughter can't speak, but they've thought, now let's try texting. Let's see if that is an easier way to, and it's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually, funny enough, a very similar case to me. When I am of course I have experienced meltdowns, but shutdowns is the type of situations that I experience. And many times, even with my partner, sofa side by side, and I'm completely frozen, unable to speak, he'll text me, and that unlocks me to feel more comfortable post one text and then speak, opening up. And in relation to my family, I live in London and I don't have family around me. They're all abroad, but we're very phone call people. And I've always forced myself into it, as I said. But when I am extremely tired or unable to pick up the phone, instead of saying, I don't want to talk now, or hanging up the phone, what I do instead is I communicate my needs, and that is, I'm unable to speak on the phone, but please text me. And that's given me a bridge to transition into, I really want to speak with you. I want to hear how your day has been. I want to share my day, but I just can't do that verbally. Can we transition that? And everyone has been really graceful in that. So I think it's, many people can relate to it. It seems as if you have figured out different types of communication with Tommy and Jude, which have different needs in communication. What would you advise to families that are navigating that? Like, where do they start in figuring out what is my child's communication style?
I think for us, it's largely been trial and error of what is it that is going to connect with Jude or with Tommy. Like for us, I think AAC is amazing. I think it's really it opens up the world for so many people, and so many people don't know about it or are worried about trying it. And actually, I had a conversation last week when I was on at one of the book events with a family who said, thank you for sharing the videos that I do about Tommy using an AAC, because they had recently started and are having some progress. And they said, we were really worried about trying it. And I said, let me guess, you thought if you try it, he's not going to speak. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly it. Because I was that person. Like when they first suggested PECs for Jude, going back 10 plus years, I was like, okay, this is great, but what if he then just becomes reliant on it and doesn't try to learn to speak, as if that was the way it worked in my head and it was that simple. But I think there is a lot of resistance about alternative forms of communication, and sometimes even within schools as well, that some schools aren't great with technology or aren't very knowledgeable about technology and what it can do, or feel like they're able to teach using it, which is a massive missed opportunity that, even I'll be honest, like the school Tommy and Jude are in isn't particularly great with technology, but they're trying, and they're trying to help encourage the use of it. So I'd say to parents, look at what's out there. There's lots of different forms of communication now. There's, even within AAC, there's different apps that will be right for some and not right for others. And I still hope that Jude will pick up AAC one day. He's good at navigating an iPad. We've just not had the success yet. And I think a lot of it is being open to a different form of communication.
Yeah.
Like, there are different means, and it does mean we're going to have to rethink. Like, I thought, oh, it's an app, it can't be that difficult, I'll figure out how to. But Tommy's probably better at it than I am now, like in using it. So, and then there's other means. There's Makaton, there's sign language, there's there's letterboards, there's all kinds of different forms. It's just trying to figure out what is right for your child, giving it a suitable period of time, and then if it's working, great, keep going. If it's not working, maybe it's time to switch to something else.
Into something else. Yeah. And I think what you're saying is just testament as to how powerful things can be as a way of communication without words, right? And I think that leads me also onto something really important, which is, in my opinion, a major misconception of how people perceive the spectrum. There's misconceptions all across the spectrum, from late diagnosed people like myself as to, we don't deserve a diagnosis, why would you if you've been able to function most of your life and you're taking resources away, but all the way, from Jude and Tommy, in the sense that if they're non-speaking, people could associate that to ability or intellect, which is so far from the truth, right? So what do you think is one thing people get wrong about non-speaking autism, or what's misunderstood about it?
I think what you just mentioned, the competence, the level of understanding. I think Tommy shows it every day in the way he communicates, the way, those text messages just prove, they really emphasize what is going on inside his head, that often with non-speaking or autistic kids or adults, people will talk around them and not to them. And I'll be honest, sometimes that person might not enjoy being spoken to, and so you do have to be mindful of that. And obviously whoever's with them can help you decipher that. But definitely, for Tommy at least, you would ask him directly, you wouldn't ask me. For Jude, maybe he does need a little bit more support with that. But yeah, I think the biggest misconception is that non-speaking almost means you don't understand. Yeah. And I think that's true of a lot of, not just autism, a lot of other disabilities as well, that where communication might be a factor, that having no spoken words means a lack of intellect, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And do you feel in that journey of like navigating what works for both of them and people potentially thinking that there's a lack of, do you feel like they've been underestimated in occasions?
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest, I've probably underestimated them at times.
They surprise you every day.
Yeah. Like I said, I never imagined that Tommy would be texting. Jude recently, he's going to be 18 in a couple of months, and last year was the first time he went to a rave. He's been to 3 now with specific nights for adults with learning disabilities. And this is a boy who, up until he was about 10, struggled to be in a classroom. He struggled to be around other kids his age with noise and anxiety and everything else. And now we go to a little nightclub full of adults with learning disabilities having the time of their life, who would do not care what anyone thinks about their dancing. They're just there to enjoy themselves, pumping music. And he's there smiling and rocking back and forth. And so, I definitely have underestimated him, that he would be able to achieve that or be able to enjoy that. And I've underestimated Tommy at times. But it goes back to your point of underestimating them sometimes in how far they can stretch and progress. But I think as a generalization, people often underestimate as I said, like intellect and just level of understanding.
And I think as well is what you're mentioning about texting and Jude going to the rave. It's trying to figure out, I guess, what unlocks that fire in them. Where is something that you can unlock the potential? Because Jude is very passionate about music, which I relate to heavily. And for me, music is I 24/7 have music on, and it's a form of stimming for me, and I really find it relaxing in comparison to other noise will throw me over the edge, right? And then Tommy unlocking that ability to text to get further, so it's trial and error, it's A/B testing to see what works, what doesn't, and how can we grow further in the things that light that fire, I guess, right?
I think that was a big realization early on with, go back to my point earlier about football, that would be something that we'd enjoy. As I took that for granted. I took it for granted that they'd like sport, or that we'd like going to the cinema, or all those different things. And when you realize your kids are developing differently or have very different interests, often we try to correct them to what is more age appropriate or what they should be doing. And when I was doing that, it was a real struggle between us. Like we weren't connecting, we weren't bonding. And one of the biggest shifts with that was me starting to enjoy what they enjoyed, starting to look at, okay, let's bond by, if I love football and you love films and we meet today and all I want to do is talk to you about football, we're not going to bond. Like, you're going to be like, oh, for God's sake. Like, so it's the same as when, like, take it back to the early years with Jude. Like, Jude used to love tapping things. He used to love, like, empty plastic bottles, tapping them, tapping radiators, like just wandering around, tapping different surfaces, getting that feedback. Whereas he should be building blocks or playing with a ball or, colouring or doing something like that. And no matter how many times I tried to do that, he didn't want to do it. When I started sitting with him and tapping a radiator or tapping the bottles or throwing the bottle up in the air or whatever it was, suddenly over time we bonded. Yeah. And we started enjoying time together, and it then creates this relationship that actually we have stuff in common. We enjoy the same things. Yeah. Jude and Tommy both still love Mickey Mouse. Like, it is on pretty much all day in our house. And Jude's going to be 18 next, in a couple of months. And he probably should be watching something different that other 18-year-olds watch. But I don't care. Like, he absolutely loves it. It lights him up. And I think that shift of starting to enjoy what they enjoy and focus on that rather than what they should be doing, then that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think something about autistic people, we're selfish in what we like, and selfish is probably not the right word, but
I know what you mean.
We're passionate about what we like, and
it can appear selfish.
So determined for what we like, and it's tapping into that. Like, if they like tapping things, he could be a drummer instead of a footballer.
Yeah, exactly.
And this concept of, like, we should be evolving with what's age appropriate. If he likes Mickey Mouse it is. No one is there to determine what should be or shouldn't be, because at the end of the day is their happiness, and if that makes them happy, well, happy days, everyone's happy, right?
Exactly. So, it's all these, like, unwritten society rules that we try to live up to that just aren't important. And it happens in so many areas of our daily lives, from the fact they don't sit at a table and eat dinner. Like,
who wants to do that anyways? I'm sorry. Yeah. If you do, you're psychotic. I hate it.
It is just something that's ingrained into us that that's what we should be doing. And Jude eats on the move. He, like, grabs something, eats it, is pacing up and down with his music. That's how he wants to eat. And no matter how many times I would try and sit him down at a table, he'll be there for 30 seconds and he's gone again. Yeah. And it's realizing that adaptation can make life so much happier and so much less stressful that it's worth it.
And ultimately it'll make your life better, right, as parents, because you're able to adapt to have them happy, and then you as a byproduct will also be happy. You started sharing their stories like 11 years ago, right, give or take, and we're here now. You have a clothing brand, you have a book. I can imagine that back then you didn't think that it would turn
Oh,
into
no.
something this
No.
large. Talk to me a little bit about SSA Clothing. How did that start, and where are you guys at now with the clothing brand?
So just over 2 years ago now, I started SAA Clothing with. I always had always, for a few years, I'd had this idea of wanting to create some clothing that raised awareness, started conversations, but was also just something that you wanted to wear every day, not like just the once a year charity t-shirt kind of thing. And realize, there's this big community of people I have, like, how can we be more connected? What can we do that would work? So launched in December 23 and it went crazy. We had like the most insane launch month, and I thought it was going to be a little sideline, few hours a week business, and suddenly was doing 18-hour days for the whole of December. And
good Christmas present.
Realized very quickly that, okay, there's a lot of interest here in that terms of community. So it quickly evolved into, I was looking for a shop. I found, it was fate. I was looking for a place. I was doing it all from home, and it was just boxes everywhere, insane. And thought, okay, we need a space. And there was a shop available a minute's walk from my house within a month. So I was like, this is fate. This is meant to be. And also we can create a space where people can come in and talk to us. And we've got a sensory room in our shop where families come in, their kids hang out in the sensory room, the mums and dads chat sometimes they're there for an hour. We give them cups of tea and they just want somewhere to offload and ask for advice. And everyone who, it's grown from this like sort of sideline business to now we've got about 6 or 7 staff who they're all either neurodivergent themselves or they're parent carers.
Yeah.
So they have lived experience. They're there. They have, whilst I'm here with you, they're in the shop now, having conversations with people, sending out orders. And the idea of the clothing really was, I always liken it to, I feel like all I do is talk about football. I'm not that football obsessed. But if I go to Arsenal on the day of an Arsenal game, there's thousands of people wearing red or wearing team shirts, and you automatically feel a connection.
Yeah.
You feel like, oh, I'm part of this group. And too often as families, we don't feel that. And what's beautiful now is with our clothing is that that's happening. Yeah. And that could be, we get sent pictures and messages of people at airports, on holiday on the beach where they've met someone who's wearing a t-shirt. At the school gates where they didn't know someone's daughter was autistic, but they've seen the mum wearing a hoodie and they've started a conversation. So it's this icebreaker that is connecting people, and that is so special. And like we have this, wonderful community now of people who, love the clothes, number one, but also are getting to know each other because of what we do.
And I think it goes back to what we were saying as well, that like, because it's an invisible disability, it's very lonely and isolating, and it's hard to make that connection. And whilst you might see somebody that might have an autistic child, you don't really know if those parents are comfortable in being approached or having that conversation. But by wearing it as if you're opening this green flag as to like, we're on the same team, we understand your challenges, and we're in this together as well. And I think it's beautiful that you've created that community hub, let's say, where people can just relax their shoulders and just breathe and connect with others that are on the same boat as them. And then that has led you into Send Fest, correct?
Yes.
So what are these events that you're putting on?
Yeah, so last year we've always been looking at what we can do for the community. We've arranged some like parent carer days and different things to try and bring people together. And we realised that often our kids or our families, we feel excluded a little bit, and not, school holidays can be hard. We can't always go to the places that we'd like to go to with our kids. And often businesses or places will put on an autism hour or an autism couple of hours where, you can go trampolining at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And that's great to an extent, but it doesn't, fit for many of us. So we thought, what can we do? There was a local like adventure farm that Tommy goes to all the time, and we spoke to them about hiring it out for the day, and we thought, great, we can hire it out for the day. We can just invite families from our community and have this like special day during the summer holidays. And we had like, I think it was 2,500 people came.
That's
the
insane.
tickets went like in 24 hours. We had this amazing, wonderful day, and it was really just so good to see people relax, to see families enjoy their day out. We had people tell us it was their only day out in the summer holidays. We had people traveling from Birmingham to Essex. We had like, because their kids could flap, they could scream, they could jump, they could
without
be themselves.
any judgment
Exactly.
or people looking twice or anything. It was their safe space, right?
Their siblings could be there and have fun too. And it was just a wonderful day. And it was so good that we did it again in October for Halloween at a different venue. Exactly the same thing. And we've got 4 already booked in this year for like May, summer holidays, October again. And yeah, we hope that we can, with some support and funding and stuff, that we can grow it. And I mean, I'd love to do it all over the country, but it's just time and being able to be at all these places. But it's such an incredible feeling. Like, I was able to a couple of times sort of just stand back that day and look and see all these families like wandering around and just being accepted and having fun. And yeah, I hope we can do a lot more of that.
No, that's definitely special and amazing. And I think, like, also you say you stood there and you took a moment to say, like, look, all of these families. But I think it's also important to do that with everything from the past 11 years, right? From the community that you're building online to the store, the clothing brand, the festival, the book. What would you say is your ultimate goal in this journey of autism awareness? Or what would, if you had one wish, what could you change in the future?
I think from everything that I do, and especially the book, is to help families feel less alone.
Yeah.
Like, I know firsthand how lonely it can feel, how debilitating it can feel because of that, and what that can do to your mental health. And for a lot of years, I felt that way. And I definitely didn't appreciate how important it was to have people around you who get it, who understand, to have someone you can text, you can call, you can just, offload with, and the difference that can make. And so many families I talk to, either because they're in the very early stages or maybe because of where they live, or like they feel that they don't have anyone. And that's why, that's why people end up following our page and many pages like mine, is because they get that connection and they feel more seen. And that is what I hope through everything I do, is that you feel part of something. You feel like you're not the only family who is going through this or who has these challenges, and that there are people out there just like you. And I see it every day because of the size of my page. I get lots of comments and messages, and so I know I'm definitely not alone. Like, I know, but so many people don't. And I hope that whether it's through reading one of my posts or, picking up the book, that they get that and they feel a bit more positive about the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Funny enough, we're coming to the end. It's flown by. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah. So everyone who sits down with me here goes through 3 quick fire questions.
Perfect.
So I have some ready for you. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Perfect. What is one thing you love the most about your boys as they are?
Okay, so Jude is his love of music. His love of music is definitely a big connection for us. Last night, from the moment he got in, he's just figured out how to use Spotify. And so now he's got playlists on his phone it's listening to, and he's rocking away, and he's in his element. And some of the happiest moments we've had is just being in the car, driving around, listening to music, flicking through the radio stations, him in the back, rocking like this, big smile on his face. And his love of music is really special.
Yeah.
Tommy, I think it's text messages aside, it's his cheekiness. And now I can really tell that he knows he's cheeky, and that before we'd sort of say it to him and think, does he understand? Does he know what but it's he's very cheeky. He's always pushing for more. He's always up to mischief and laughing about it. And I love that side of him.
Beautiful. Okay. Next question. There's been, of course, a growth in diagnosis, and there's more people like me being diagnosed. What would you want people that are later on diagnosed with autism in life to know about the reality of your family and other families?
I don't think it's any different than any person. What I'd want them to know really is that autism is a real wide and varied spectrum. And I think it's no different whether you're autistic or you're neurotypical. I think it's just understanding that what autism may be like for you can be very different for someone else. And that's the same for what, I know a lot about what autism means for Jude and Tommy. I know secondhand from what I've seen of people I've met along the way what autism can be like for them.
Yeah.
And, even from our conversations today, what it might mean for you. But that doesn't mean I know what autism is like for everybody. And I think it's a really hard concept for people to understand.
It is, yeah.
Because the spectrum is so wide and varied. Like, how can Jude be autistic and you be autistic, for example? And for the general population, I think that is really hard to get their head around. But that is what it is. And I think the more we can start to understand and appreciate that, the more informed and the better it will be.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's an understanding and respect for Jude and Tommy's reality. And of course, like, people like myself have different experiences later on in life, right? But it's holding space for the challenges that families like yours have as well, because it's something that is affecting daily and is very challenging in many ways. And of course, people like me as well, we have challenges, but it's different realities because the spectrum, as you said, is wide. And it shows up for everyone differently. But I agree, it's a hard concept for people to grasp. Okay, one message you would want people to take away from the book?
I think one of the themes of the book that is true for anybody is I talk a lot about what happens when life doesn't quite go to plan.
Yeah.
So when life doesn't pan out as you expected, now that for me is a lot of it is around the journey of Jude and Tommy.
Yeah.
It's also around divorce and co-parenting. It's around being a carer for my mum and dad. It's around change of career. It's, there's so many things that have happened in the last 15, 20 years that are just weren't part of the plan, weren't part of how I hoped to imagine life would go. And at times that's been, heartbreaking, upsetting, stressful. But amongst that, you adapt and change. And, even amongst, I've had some incredibly hard times and things that I never would have imagined. But there's a lot of joy too, and there's a lot of happiness, and there's a lot of love. And I think when our expectations and dreams don't quite pan out, you can still make a real happy and fun life too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I think you, of course, realize the impact you've had to families, right? Because of the size of your page and how impactful what you put out there and the response it has. But I think when people see things on Instagram and follow stories like yourselves and your family, it goes much deeper than what you might think just putting a post out there, because you make people feel seen and understood and loved and respected in their reality as well. So I know there's so many families like yourself navigating it early on like you were, and halfway through, and now you're kind of finding joy in the family life. What would you tell them as they're going through that journey for them to feel hope and see your story as inspiration?
I think in the early days, you don't always appreciate that you're very new to this. Your child's very new to this. Like your child being upset in a supermarket, well, they've only been there 3 times before in their life. Like, it is very overwhelming and scary, and you're new to autism too, and how to parent an autistic child. So I think accepting and understanding that as early as you can is a big part of it. But also, I think, I always say to families I talk to that time changes everything. And that's time for us to learn. That's time for our kids to learn. That's time for us to find the right support, the support that works. It's time for us to adapt to, I live in a very different way than I was living 10 plus years ago with Jude and Tommy, because I've figured out what works each day for them and also works for me and how I fit in amongst that. And it takes time to get to that stage. It takes time for you to adapt, for our kids to learn, and it all to sort of come together. And I feel like probably in the last 5+ years, there's, we've sort of settled into this sort of regular way of living now for us that's become our new normal as such. And I think when you get there, you feel a lot more capable and a lot more confident about what you and your kids can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's beautiful. Well, Love Needs No Words is a memoir that is incredibly inspiring. It's honest. It's emotional. I've seen a lot of people crying. I must say,
I apologize for that.
No, don't. When you trigger that emotion, you're like, job done. That's it. We've written the right book to inspire millions and for people to have hope and to make families like yourself seen. And I think it's also, whilst for you it might just be your story, I think it's an incredibly inspiring tool to drive awareness of autism. For that, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's been beautiful to see the tour that you've done and the reception that it's had from people and how excited people are to read it, to the point that I believe it's top 15 in global Amazon last week.
It was, yeah. And well, this will be coming out after, so it's going to be number 3 on the Sunday Times chart this week.
Wow, congrats. That's fascinating, but very well deserved. So the book is available now online and in stores. And James, thank you so much for carving time out of your busy schedule to sit down with me.
No, thank you, Lara. This has been amazing. Such a good chat.
Thank you so much.